Hi, I'm Mary Jane Begin, professor, author, and illustrator, and I've been asked by lynda.com to create an image out of three elements that they've just introduced to me and compose a picture that either tells a story or explains some kind of idea. So, with not having looked at these before, I'm not sure exactly what to do, so I'll start with what I usually do, which is to thumbnail. I'll do some really simple sketches that are small and give me a sense of where I should put things. I have a boat, I have water, I have a tree. Where do I put each thing? I'm starting with the water because I'm thinking about that as being at the base of the image. And I'm thinking, well, what if the boat is in the water and the tree is in the background? That's where I'm starting. And the tree is a really great shape. So this seems really boring to me, though. So, like, here's my boat, here's my water. No. Now, the thing that I have to think about is I can play with the framework of the shape. It doesn't have to be square. It doesn't have to be rectangle. They didn't give me that parameter. So what if I go in a horizontal band? I'm also looking at a boat I'm looking down into, and that's my point of reference. So I sort of have to think about the perspective of the boat as a guideline for my point of view. When I thumbnail, I tend to think about shapes and value first before anything else, because it helps me to think simply. Now, I love the fact that this boat has no one in it, and yet it looks like the oars are up as though it was just rowed recently. So that's a really cool thing. And for me, that sort of starts to tell a story. I start to think about who was just in that boat. Anybody? Is the boat rowing itself? I don't know. What about this tree? What's the story with the tree? It has a kind of personality and shape that's really interesting. It's very bare. It almost looks like it's, I don't want to say dead, but it doesn't look like it's flourishing. So what if the boat is sort of angling towards the tree somehow? Maybe make this composition a little taller. I'm also thinking about some compositional rules, which is, in this case, a 2/3 rule, the golden mean or the golden rule, where you want an image to be broken in 2/3 and a third as opposed to in half, simply because it creates more visual interest. So if I start to think about that, place my tree somewhere back here, maybe on a little island. Here's my boat. It starts to be a little more interesting, but I'm going to play with another potential point of view or frame and point of view and push that boat a little more dramatically as though I'm above it like a bird's eye view, and see what that looks like. Now, at this point, I'm thumbnailing, so it's really just, it's stream of consciousness. I'm thinking and drawing, but I'm doing more drawing that's helping me to think than really contemplating it. I'm sort of just seeing what happens as I play with these different elements. I also have, this water has a kind of roughness to it. So, what does that tell me? Where should I go with that? Again, I'm trying not to break up the space in half because that would be boring. But I'm at a certain point of view with this boat, if I play with it this way. So now I have to think about the point of view of this tree, which in this case, I'm looking up at it. I'm looking down at the boat, I'm looking up at the tree, which is a pretty interesting challenge. I have to imagine what that tree might look like from this point of view. And would there even be sky? We'd probably be looking down at just an element of a tree and maybe a little bit of something in the distance. Maybe I'm casting a shadow. Maybe the boat is not even on the water. Maybe it's floating freely above the water. Suddenly, when I do that, I'm taking this out of a place where it's necessarily realistic. And honestly, when you have illustration clients, oftentimes, they throw various elements at you that you have to figure out what to do with them. And sometimes they don't make sense, but you have to make sense of them, either conceptual sense or narrative sense. So it's a challenge. It's what makes it interesting. There's something about the boat hovering above the water that I really like. I kind of like this format, but I'm going to just keep playing with some thumbnails. What if I try a square? A square is a kind of safe format. It's harder to compose with than a long band horizontal or a tall vertical, because there's not a lot of places to go. You tend to land in the center. So if I choose a square, and I'm still looking at the direction of this boat, I like that. There's something about that's sort of my key that I'm working with. I'm going to try placing it. What if it is placed more in the center? What if I cut part of the boat off? What happens then? What if we don't see the back end? When you're thumbnailing, you're trying to think of as many possible solutions as you can. You don't want to just think of one way and then I'm done. That's not interesting. So if I try, I liked that hovering of the boat above the water. So I'm going to leave that, cast a little kind of faux indication of a shadow, and see what happens if the boat is cut off. But then I look at this and say, wait, there's a weird tangent here. So I'm going to crop in a little more so it doesn't look like I'm cutting off the edge of the boat. So that's never a good idea. You never want to cut things off right at the tip. It's called a tangent, and it's not a good idea. It draws attention outside the frame. It pulls you out of the picture. So what if I put the tree on the other side on an island on this side? Well, the problem with that is if the tree is over here and the boat is over here, there's nothing going on in this part of the composition, so that doesn't work either for me. So let me go back to something I liked, which is this point of view. Try another. I liked the idea of the square, so I'm going to try another version of that square. Here, I'm also starting to think about, and this might be a weird thing, but what if I put the tree inside the boat? What if the tree is actually as though it's riding the boat or growing out of the boat somehow? What would that be like? And this is just stream of consciousness. I'm thinking things through, thinking about what is the story or idea that I want to tell? What does it mean? And so that's just one potential concept. And I don't know if it's going to work, but it's something that I'm thinking about. But then I start to think to myself, the austerity of that boat and how it might be wanting to get to that tree is the story that keeps rolling around in my head. And this doesn't get there. So I want to go back to the core, which is the story. And I'm going to do a few more thumbnails and see what I can come up with that speaks to that story. So I finished my thumbnails and I tried to work through a lot of different ways of thinking about what story I was trying to tell. And I started with the boat from the left going towards the tree, imagining the tree might be on a small island and the boat is trying to reach it. And so I kept thumbnailing that out with the boat on the left, stage left, heading to the right, which is the way Westerners read stories. So that made sense to me. I tried shifting and sketching the boat really large and making the tree small, far away. And for some reason, it just wasn't working. And then I did this rough little sketch of the boat on a kind of tiny island with this tree. And suddenly, I was like, that's the story. When you choose a moment to tell, you often want to choose the right moment. And it could be at the beginning of the action, the middle, or after something's already happened. And so I wanted it to be where the boat's already landed and the boat and the tree are together. It's kind of a love story. So these are inanimate objects, but for me as a storyteller, my compositions come out of wanting to explain a narrative. So what I'm going to do is take this little tiny thumbnail and translate it to a larger sketch.